nervous because I'm here now.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm Glenn Martin here with my co-host James Haskell and a new friend to the show. We invited the managing editor for the Colts Wire, Kevin Hickey, on. So thanks, Kevin, for joining the show.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we invited Kevin on to get a behind the enemy lines, get a little inside scoop on what the Colts are looking like. Because we're over in Ravenland, we don't pay too much attention to everyone else, so it's nice to have someone on who does. So Jimmy, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again. Like Glenn said, Kevin, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is I thought it was kind of interesting. Of course, we'll start with the quarterback. When you guys picked up Phillip Rivers, a lot of people said that you guys were just a quarterback away, but he took the 1-year deal knowing it was going to be 1 year, got the $25 million. What has it been like? What's the dichotomy there, having Phillip Rivers as the quarterback thus far, and as a Colts team, and as far as the Colts fans go, do people like him? And the other thing I was going to ask you, is it weird that you already kind of know he's a one and done type situation, and how do people feel about that?
Yeah, so I mean, when they were kind of going after Phillip Rivers, to be honest, I didn't think too much of it. I thought it was more noise than anything. I knew they had the history with Frank Reich during his time in San Diego, but he's been kind of as expected. He's a guy that's not going to make too many plays outside the pocket. If you give him good protection, he can make plays down the field, and that's something that the Colts really missed last year with Jacoby Brissett. He didn't look downfield at all. So he's been kind of as advertised. He's going to make some risky throws. He's going to try to push the ball, and sometimes that backfires. But you give him good protection, you get him a decent run game, he's going to be fine. So then you bring in the whole, his chemistry in the locker room. The team loves him. They named him a captain pretty quickly, and
wow.
Being on a 1-year deal, it's pretty weird. Because you go for years with Andrew Luck, and you're kind of hoping that he stays healthy, and they start to build around him. And they started to do that when Chris Ballard took over in 2017. But, then he has the whole injury, and then you're kind of in quarterback purgatory there, because you got Jacoby Brissett. You kind of want to see what he wants to do. Can he carry a team? Obviously, that was answered last year. And then you bring in Rivers, who he's going to be 2 years max. He said he wants to do it at least 2020 and then maybe 2021, but I don't think it's going to be anything past that. So it is a little bit weird, because now you really have to focus on the quarterback position when you talk about, what kind of moves they need to make in the offseason. But he's been about as advertised. He's been a good quarterback when he gets protection. He does have some risky throws, but when you're talking about a guy that wants to push the ball downfield, I think Colts fans would rather have that than a conservative mindset with Brissett.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that he benefits from a strong run game. And I wanted to talk about that run game, because Marlon Mack had a pretty good season in 2019. So it was a bit of a surprise to see Indy take Jonathan Taylor in the second round of this past draft. But it certainly paid off when Mack went down with the Achilles injury in week 1. But now we hear that Taylor is dealing with an ankle injury. So right now, what is the look of the Colts backfield, and who's going to be healthy and contributing on Sunday?
So right now, Jonathan Taylor is dealing with an ankle injury. It kind of got brought up after the game. The Colts say they learned about it after their win against the Lions. He was a limited participant on Wednesday, so he should play, barring a setback against the Ravens. But yeah, like you said, it was a shock. I was shocked that they traded up for Taylor, because they went with Michael Pittman at number 34, and then they had another pick at 44. And I figured they were going to, go defensive line. They might go cornerback, but no, they went with Taylor. They just loved his skill set, his ability to kind of be everything. He is a 3-down back, even if he hasn't particularly shown it this year. So he's dealing with an ankle, but he should play. Jordan Wilkins would step in if he missed time, and we saw Jordan Wilkins kind of take over in week 8 during the second half. He outcarried Taylor 14-1 in the second half of that game against the Lions. So it's a bit of a committee right now. I think Taylor still will get the bulk of the work. He'll still be the starter. They'll mix in Nyheim Hines, who's a great pass-catching back, really elusive in the open field, really catches the ball well. He and Phillip Rivers have good chemistry, even if Hines' usage really isn't what we thought it was going to be. But they'll kind of mix all three guys in. If Taylor's a little bit limited, we'll see a lot more Jordan Wilkins on early downs.
All right, well, we'll be excited to see that for sure. One to stand on the offensive side of the ball. Let's talk about the wide receiver core at the beginning of the season. They looked good on paper, of course, with the 1-2 punch between T.Y. Hilton and Pittman, who you just mentioned. He was a guy that Glenn and I identified in the draft as somebody that, we were hoping the Ravens would go after. But, things have changed as season goes on. What do you make of that 1-2 punch, and what does the wide receiver core look like today? The other important question, who's healthy?
Yeah, that's the big question. Ty is a guy, he's dealing with a groin injury right now. He left the game at halftime last week against the Lions. He has a groin right now. But to be honest, even when he was healthy, he wasn't really doing much. He wasn't really a guy that was demanding targets like he has in the past, which is kind of a shock given what we've seen from Philip Rivers. We've seen him really target the number one wide receiver with Keenan Allen. So it's a bit of a shock to see Ty kind of not produce as expected. He didn't practice on Wednesday, so he's definitely a guy to watch because he could miss the game if he doesn't wind up practicing this week. They might want to hold him out, especially with the Thursday night game against the Titans coming up. So, after Hilton, Pittman just came back from the IR. He had compartment leg syndrome after the week 3 game against the Vikings. So he's been on IR up until last week.
What is that?
So I'm not a doctor, but apparently it's like a bunch of pressure builds up in your leg, and they have to essentially rush you into surgery and cut open your leg and relieve the pressure. And it's something that can be very dangerous and something that could wind up like Colts offensive coordinator Nick Sirianni said he had the same thing during his playing career, but his got infected after the surgery. So it wound up being like a longer timeline to recovery. Luckily Pittman didn't have to deal with that. They kind of got it done after the game, and it was clean after that. So, Pittman, they're kind of hoping is going to take a step forward. He's looked good. He's looked, kind of like that boundary wide receiver that they want. If Hilton misses, he's definitely going to have to step up and play a bigger role. A guy you're going to want to look at is Marcus Johnson. He's their deep threat. He's the guy that makes the plays down the field. He leads the team in yards per reception, and he's a guy that really opens up the offense, whether it's them making a play downfield, whether it's Rivers, looking downfield on a go route or a post, but he's also going to just kind of clear the routes out underneath. So he's a guy you need to pay attention to in the wide receiver core.
I think right about now we need to pay attention to all of them, right, Glenn, based on our depth at cornerback.
Yeah. And I wanted to get into that because the offensive line in Indy might be the best in the league, but if the Ravens can get some of these guys off the COVID-19 list, it's 7 guys right now on the list, and a lot of them, mostly all of them, are key contributors on defense. But if those guys are able to suit up on Sunday and clear the protocol, the Ravens are bringing a pretty darn good front 7 to Indy.
Oh yeah.
So with that matchup, who do you like? Who do you favor in that matchup? The O-line versus the front 7 for the Ravens?
Yeah, that's really tough because the Colts they've had a very good offensive line the past 2 years. They started the season maybe a little bit slow, but they've really kicked it into gear. I think they're allowing among the least pressure in the NFL, and this is going to be their big test. So they have everybody healthy on the offensive line. Obviously, if Matthew Judon can't play because he's one of the guys on the list, that's going to be huge for the Colts. But I'm going to be honest, it's tough, man, because this is the matchup to me, at least. This is what's going to determine the game. If the Ravens come out and dominate the offensive line and they get pressure on Rivers, because, he can't move. So all you got to do is get pressure on him. He's not going to be able to evade it as much. He can't make plays a lot outside the pocket. So, I think this is when you're kind of looking at one of the best front 7s, if not the best front 7 in football, against one of the best offensive lines in football. This is the best test for the Colts. So I might have to give the edge to the Ravens just because what they can do with Calais Campbell, what they can do with Pernell McPhee and all those guys up front. So what the Colts are going to have to do is they're going to have to protect well, obviously. I mean, that's the game plan every week, but they're going to have to move the guys off their spot. They're going to have to be able to climb to the second level in the run game. So it's definitely going to be a good test.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's going to be a fun one to watch. And I tell you what, not that Lamar is playing like he did last year, but it might be frustrating for Colts fans a couple times to watch Phillips back there stand as a statue and then turn around and Lamar get the ball and him just take off, right? But I'm sure that team's experienced that every week. Once again, not that Lamar's playing perfectly, because
no, I mean, you're talking about two totally different ends of the spectrum. You got a guy who makes plays all the time with his legs, and when Phillip Rivers runs outside the pocket, you're like, oh man, this guy's gonna tear something.
It just makes me think of, when somebody's in slow motion, they're just
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, he's trying to make plays, and I'm like, oh man, you might not want to do that. You might want to just relax a little bit.
Just go down like the Manning
man.
brothers.
That reminds me. I know Orioles fans will remember J.J. Hardy, the old shortstop. When he would run to first base, it looked like he was in physical pain running to first base, and that kind of reminds me of Phillip Rivers. But
yeah.
But anyway,
well, one of the things I wanted to ask you is kind of move over to the defensive side of the, your front seven. You guys paid a big price tag for DeForest Buckner, of course, picking him up from the Niners. That was the biggest move in the offseason. The Colts locked him up for the foreseeable future. They paid a steep price. So, Kevin, this is the question. Has Buckner been worth the price tag?
He's been worth it and more, to be honest with you. He's been absolutely amazing. For years since Chris Ballard took over, he talked about getting that 3 technique that can really make a difference. And they found it. Buckner, when they made the trade, they gave up the number 13 pick, and then immediately signed Buckner to, it was 4 years, $84 million. I think that's second among defensive interior. I think it's behind Aaron Donald. I can't remember. But yeah, they paid a steep price, and he has been amazing. He leads them in pressures. He's among the leaders in run stops. He's just all over the place, and he's the engine of the defense. He's everything they wanted. He can win in multiple ways. They can line him up at the 1 technique and have him beat the center in the A gap. I mean, he really has been everything that they want. And in my opinion, he is the reason that this front seven is kind of taking that step forward as we kind of hope, because when you add in, you got a veteran, Justin Houston, he's reliable. And then you got guys like Darius Leonard, Bobby Okereke, they're flying around in the second level. But when you have that 3 technique that just gets upfield and applies pressure, it's been great. He's been a real reason that front seven is starting to become one of the best in the league.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on some other guys, because they do have quite a nice mix of youth and veteran leadership up front, and that's kind of got me a little concerned, because we know that the Ravens are not hitting on all cylinders in the passing game. There's no doubt about that, but the rushing attack still tops the league. So how has that front seven handled specifically the rush attack of other teams, and how do you see them handling the Ravens' rush attack?
Yeah, so obviously they have not seen a rushing attack like the Ravens. They haven't seen a mobile quarterback who can move like Lamar Jackson. They haven't seen the kind of scheme that the Ravens bring. To be honest, I don't know if they've seen backs like J.K. Dobbins, even Gus Edwards. I don't think Mark Ingram's going to play. You guys would more know about that than me. But the thing about the Colts defense is they've been stout against the run, and they have been elite, to say the least. I think a big reason is because of Grover Stewart. He's their nose tackle. He's their 1 technique. He emerged last year in the second half, and he's really taken over this year. He leads the team in run stops. He's really just a baller, man. He gets in the backfield. He redirects running backs into other defenders. He makes plays himself. They're second in yards per attempt allowed against opposing teams. They are second in yards per game allowed on the ground. So this is obviously going to be a massive test, but if they are going to win this game, it's going to have to be obviously containing Lamar Jackson is, it's every team's game plan when they play the Ravens, but they're going to have to stop J.K. Dobbins. They're going to have to stop Gus Edwards. And they've been able to do that this year. They've shut down Joe Mixon. They limited Dalvin Cook. They've done well against the run. So if there's one part of the defense that has been borderline elite, it's been against the run. So that's going to be a huge matchup for them.
I
don't like hearing that, Kevin. I don't like hearing that one bit.
Well, I tell you what, it's going to be an exciting matchup for sure to watch that go back and forth, the run defense and then our running offense, because, we lost last week, but they were giving up 68 yards per game. We put up 265 on them. So it's definitely going to be interesting to watch. Hopefully they don't try for our sake, hopefully they try and copy the Steelers defensive game plan. But we'll definitely see that. One of the things that I think is interesting about your offense, similar to ours last year, you have a crowded tight end group. We're kind of missing that, and I think Glenn and I both are a little envious at this point. But you have Burton, you got Doyle, you got Allie Cox, all contributing to the offense. How do the Colts use these guys in different ways? Yeah,
so they're gonna use them in various ways. They're gonna try to get 12 personnel on the field. They're going to even use 13 personnel at times, when they need a heavy package and they're trying to run the ball. Excuse me. Doyle hasn't really been as much of a receiving threat as he has. He's a little bit older. They're using him more as a blocker. The guys in the passing game you're going to look for are Allie Cox and Burton. They're running the routes. They are getting the targets in the tight end room, while Doyle is more the inline guy who's helping out against the run or with the run. You're going to see Allie Cox. They're going to try to use him on corner routes, on dig routes. They're going to try to get him open in space where he can make a play. Burton's more of a shorter to intermediate type of guy. They're going to use him at the goal line. They're going to use him in wildcat packages. Twice this year, he scored on a wildcat rush attempt. So they're going to get creative with the tight end room. They love the athleticism they have in the tight end room. And just given Frank Reich's history, we've seen it with the Eagles. That scheme really likes to emphasize the tight end. They feel that's where the mismatch is going to be, because if you get them on a linebacker, they're usually faster, a little more athletic than the linebackers. You get them on a safety, they're usually a little bigger. So they are really going to hit it hard. They're going to target Allie Cox. They're going to target Burton. They love to get those guys involved, especially if T.Y. Hilton's going to be out. So, and I know T.Y. hasn't really been targeted as much as we said earlier, but this tight end room is going to be a major part of the game plan.
Yeah, and I'm glad that Jimmy asked that, because we did a show right before the trade deadline looking at potential targets for the Ravens at tight end, because the report came out that the trade with the Eagles fell through due to the injury to Ertz. And Allie Cox was the guy that I brought up as a guy that they could target if the Colts were to decide to be sellers, which, you know, they're very much in contention. So I understand that,
right,
that they wouldn't. But shocking to see, when you look at Pro Football Focus grades, he's the highest graded tight end in the league, and it's not even that close, especially when you look at it from a receiving standpoint. So why is it that Allie Cox isn't getting? I hear Trey Burton's back; he's getting handoffs. They're trying to find what. Why isn't Allie Cox getting more involved in this offense when he's grading out to be spectacular?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the question I've been asking myself a little bit, because Burton started the season on IR. He was dealing with an injury. So really the first 3 weeks of the season, it was Doyle and Allie Cox. Then Doyle gets hurt in week 1. So it's just Allie Cox in week 2 and 3. And we finally get to see, this whole time that they've had Allie Cox, they signed him the summer of 2018. He did like a workout, because he played basketball at VCU. So he did a workout for like 10 or 11 teams. The Colts were the ones that wound up signing him. And they've loved him the entire time. Every offseason we heard Allie Cox is making improvements. He's getting better as a route runner. He's making more plays as a receiver. And what we knew about Allie Cox was he's going to move people in the run game. He's a great blocker. He's really great against the run, for the run. And that's really what they used him for in 2018, 2019. And then this year we start to see, wow, this dude, he can make plays in the passing game too. So it is a bit, head scratching that he hasn't been as involved as he should be, but it's something that Nick Sirianni kind of said, the offensive coordinator. He said it a couple weeks ago where, after Allie Cox kind of has these blow up games, I think he had 100 yards against the Jets in week 2, and then 50 yards and a touchdown against the Vikings. I might have that switched. It might be the Vikings in week 2, whatever. So after he kind of blows up and he's making these big plays, teams are going to start scheming against him. They're going to start rolling a little bit more of their coverage against him. And when you have a guy that's 6'7", 260 pounds, and he has the athleticism of a basketball player, that's going to be huge for the passing game. So yeah, so you're going to see, they're going to try to get him involved, but defenses are starting to take notice. Like, this guy's going to make plays. He's a big target. He's an athletic target. He has sure hands. So that's kind of what's led to his lack of usage per se, but they started to get him a little more involved last week, which was good to see, especially coming out of the bye week.
One of the things I was curious about, and Glenn talked about this, and he kind of alluded to this in his question, but as far as the trade deadline is now come and gone, were you expecting them to be, like Glenn said, they're contenders. You guys are, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 5-2 at this point. Yep. Contenders, looking like you have a chance to move into the postseason. Any moves that you wish would have happened? Were you expecting them to make any moves, or were you not surprised that they just kind of stood pat?
I wasn't expecting it at all. Since Ballard took over before the 2017 season, he's never made a deal at the deadline. He's a guy that will trade during the offseason, during the draft, loves doing that. He'll trade picks, he'll trade players, anything he thinks that will help the team. But he had kind of a telling quote before the deadline where he's like, teams think you're desperate. They think, you're 5-2, you want to win, so you're going to pay up for a veteran who's going to help you. But, there's kind of a common sense thing that goes into it where we're not just going to buy somebody just to buy somebody. So I wasn't expecting them to make a move. You would think maybe, the areas they might want to look at were probably defensive end. Like Ryan Kerrigan was a guy that, wasn't reported to have interest from the Colts, but he was kind of a guy that was like, hey, if they do go after somebody, it'll probably be Ryan Kerrigan. Then you think the injuries to the wide receiver core, because Michael Pittman just came back. T.Y.'s got an injury now. Paris Campbell's been on IR, and he's a huge part of the offense in terms of explosiveness, getting plays, yards after the catch. So, you were thinking maybe they go after, do they make a splash play and go for Kenny G? But being the way that Chris Ballard likes to operate, he's very calculated. He's very precise with his moves. So I wasn't really expecting them to make a move. I would have been surprised if they did.
He's gotta do his best Eric DeCosta impression and just go trade a 5th rounder for a Pro Bowler, because that's all he does.
I don't understand. When that happened, I was like, what are you doing, Jacksonville? Come on.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I don't know how he does it every single year. It's a miracle. But I wanted to ask you one quick question about the secondary, because it looks like there's another situation where there's the mix of youth and experience with Xavier Rhodes coming over from Minnesota, and then the team drafting Julian Blackmon. But I don't know a ton past that. So how is the secondary playing? How are guys like who is and how good are guys like Kenny Moore and Khari Willis? Because I don't know a lot about them except for the fact that they play a lot of snaps for the Colts.
Yeah, so those guys that you just mentioned, Kenny Moore, Khari Willis, Julian Blackmon, even Xavier Rhodes in recent weeks, they all play 100% of snaps. The Colts don't really rotate their secondary as much as other teams might. Obviously, Xavier Rhodes, he's having a nice bounce-back season. He's been incredible in locking down opposing wide receivers. Julian Blackmon has been kind of what the Colts wanted in Malik Hooker, their first-round pick from 2017. He's this rangy guy, good instincts, good ball skills. But Hooker wasn't really all that physical. Julian Blackmon is all of that plus the physicality. So they're loving what they see from him, and it's kind of crazy because he tore his ACL in December. So, 8-9 months ago, he was, he had to have reconstructive surgery on his knee, and he's already back making plays. So the guys you mentioned, Kenny Moore, probably a bit biased here, but he's one of the best, if not the best, slot cornerback in the NFL. He is incredible. Wow. He is their Swiss Army knife. They're going to use him in press coverage. They're going to use him in zone, in man. They're going to blitz from the nickel spot. They are going to use him everywhere. And he's one of the best open field tacklers, despite being 5'7". So they love him because he's got a huge wingspan. He's very athletic. He makes plays in space like no one else. And then another guy you're going to want to look after is Rock Ya-Sin. He was their 2nd-round pick last year. He's really just assumed that cornerback 1 role, very physical at the line of scrimmage, getting much better in terms of not grabbing as much. That was kind of one of his problems last year. He's a Temple product, and he's really starting to come into his own. So Khari Willis is another guy. He's more the strong safety. He's going to make more plays against the run when they go into their cover 1, cover 3 looks. He's going to be more towards the line of scrimmage in the box, trying to make plays against the run. They blitz him on occasion, but they're not a team that likes to blitz very much. I think they're 29th in blitz percentage. So they're not going to blitz a whole lot, but they'll use Khari Willis and Kenny Moore a little bit on blitzes when they do.
Nice. Well, no surprise that Julian Blackmon, of course, is balling out for you guys. As he's a University of Utah alum, and that just is kind of what we do. So no surprise there. But just wanted to ask you about this game specifically. I want to get your keys to the game. If you can say in this matchup, the Colts will need to do one thing in order to come out with a victory defensively and offensively. We'll go defensively first. What would you say that one thing is?
Defensively, obviously, and I'm sure you guys hear this every week, stop the run. They've been elite at stopping the run. They've been great. They need to keep that up. Making sure that Lamar Jackson doesn't make too many plays outside the pocket is obviously going to be huge. Setting the edge is going to be huge. But if they can slow down at least J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, that's going to be huge because, as you said earlier, Lamar hasn't been the passer that he was last year. Obviously, his season last year was insane. I think he had like a 9% touchdown rate, and he was just making plays all over the field. So he's regressed a little bit, but I'm still a believer in Lamar Jackson. I still think he's an elite talent. He's still a much better passer than I think he gets credit for. So if you can kind of force him to stay one-dimensional in a sense, you're not going to be able to do it fully just because of his rushing ability, but you can slow down J.K. Dobbins, slow down Gus Edwards. That's going to be huge on the defensive side of the ball. The offensive side of the ball, it's going to be protect Phillip Rivers. He's shown the last 2 games that even if the Colts run game isn't as we expect it to be, because it hasn't been, he can still make plays when he's not getting pressured. But when he's constantly getting pressured and he has to force a throw, it's just going to increase the probability of him having a turnover. So protecting Phillip Rivers is going to be the biggest key for them on the offensive side of the ball.
All right, Kevin. Well, we got to get your prediction before we let you go. So what is actually going to happen this Sunday? Yeah, got to do it.
I have no idea. That's the problem. Because we do a little thing. We have a thing with USA Today Sports Weekly, and the home team kind of does like a, keys to the matchup and, who's going to win and stuff. And we write it before the week's games start, obviously. And I originally picked the Ravens to win. I thought it was going to be like a 29-23 game, but that was also before the whole COVID news with Marlon Humphrey and
the whole defense.
Yeah, exactly. The whole defense. Then you lose Ronnie Stanley and Tyree Phillips. They're on IR now. So I still think it's going to be too much. I think the Ravens defense, if they have enough players, if they get Matthew Judon back, they get Patrick Queen back, I think it will be enough to disrupt the offense because the rushing game really hasn't been there. And then they just haven't faced a guy like Lamar Jackson. They haven't faced this kind of run scheme. They haven't faced this kind of explosive offense this season. So, I'm going to have to go with the Ravens. I think it's going to be the Ravens. It might be a little lower scoring than we expect, but I think the Ravens are going to pull this out.
Nice. Well, we'll definitely be interested to see. I think it's going to be a great game, a fun one to watch. So, Kevin, where can our viewers and the folks that listen to the show, where can they find what you're working on?
So the website is coltswire.usatoday.com. On Twitter, it's at the Colts Wire. You can follow me at Kevin Hickey 11. The picture on my profile is not me. It is a picture of Miles Morales, Spider-Man. So don't get alarmed if you do that. Nice. But yeah, that's where you can find my stuff.
Awesome, man. Well, we appreciate you coming on.
Loves that movie.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
We appreciate you coming on and we appreciate you taking time out this evening. Good luck this weekend, and we'll be sure to talk to you soon.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Yep.